Well, good morning and welcome to this week's edition of Coffee with a Coach. You know, recently I've been on Facebook and I was friended by a group of alumni of a place that I was stationed many years ago when I was in the Navy. Now, when I first joined the Navy, my biggest dream was to go to Australia. Unfortunately for me, my very first set of orders were to Australia. And I had this picture in my head of what it was going to look like. But when I got there, I realized it was a very different place than what I thought. Where I was stationed was a place called Navcom Stay Harold E. Holt in Exmouth, Western Australia. It was on the far west end of the continent. It was right on the coast, beautiful beaches, but aside from that it was pretty desolate. Red clay soil, huge termite hills everywhere, kangaroos running all over the place, emus picking through the garbage. Very different from what I expected. And what I found as I got busy there working, I was a dental assistant way back then, this was about 1984 time frame, was that if you really didn't get out and get involved, there was not a whole lot to do. In addition to that, because it was so isolated, there was a lot of things that we didn't have that we took for granted. When you'd make trips to Perth, which was a very long drive to get there, probably, I think if I remember right, about a 10 or 12 hour drive, the first place everybody went was to McDonald's because you just didn't have McDonald's. On the base, there was very few facilities, very few resources. You went down to the commissary and the foods that you really liked to eat were, if they were still there, the packages were outdated, and if you went up to the exchange, they just didn't have much of anything. TV channel on base was the AFRTS, which is the DoD channel, reruns of shows and some very pro-military commercials. And in town, if you had TV, they had a thing called the ABC, which was the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, very much like the BBC. If you didn't appreciate British humor, you didn't like that either. And overall, in terms of the experience, it was really a tough place to be. What's interesting, though, is years later, I look back on that time as one of the best places I'd ever been. So many wonderful experiences. And yet while I was there, I remember grumbling and complaining. I remember all the people around me complaining. And that was the running thing. So how much time you got left on the Cape? Well, I've got 3 months, 2 days, 12 hours, and a wake-up. Most people couldn't wait to get out of there. But now looking at this alumni group, everybody on that list misses it. So what's the lesson? You know, I don't know where you're at today, and maybe you've got some kind of personal tragedy going on. But keep in mind, aside from personal tragedy, if things are not going well for you right now, it's quite possible you look back in a few years and say, wow, those were the best times of my life. There's something going on today that later on in life you're going to look back on and say, wow, that really was a good thing. It may not be fun right now, but down the line you may look back on it. So what I would offer you this week is to think about right now, wherever you're at, what can you do to make things better? What can you do to take advantage of the situation now so that 10 years down the line you can look back and say it was tough, but I really enjoyed it and I made the most of it. No big sermon this week, just a few thoughts to think about, and next week on next week's Coffee with a Coach we're going to be back into our power and influence study. But meanwhile, take that, think about it, have a great week. I'll see you next week on Coffee with a Coach.